Ernest Stevens. I'm the Deputy Division Director for Law Enforcement at the Council of State Governments Justice Center.
So what inspired you to join law enforcement?
Wow, I joined law enforcement back in 1992. Was my first police academy that I went to. And, Michael, was something I always just wanted to do at a very young age. I seemed to work at a job where they always had security, off-duty security there. And just talking to the officers, they made it sound fun. And I was lucky enough in my high school to have a law enforcement class that I was able to take that gave me a little bit of a higher overview about law enforcement. And it was just something I felt called to do.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, again, it started in 1992. I began at a very small municipality here in San Antonio called Terrell Hills. Very upper class, well-to-do type of neighborhood there. So it wasn't a whole lot to do. Things were pretty quiet. And I stayed there for about 2.5 years and then had the opportunity to test for the San Antonio Police Department and joined there in 1994. And like most officers, you start out in patrol. I was in patrol for about 5 years. I did some time as a field training officer where I was training the new recruits that were coming out from the academy. From there, I spent some time in a street crimes team, which was a proactive type patrol. We weren't responsible for calls, but go out and look for crime in specific areas. I then transferred to the DWI task force where I spent 3 years working DWI. Then I went to a tactical response unit, which again was similar to the proactive patrol, but we were partnered with the gang unit and really focused in on illicit drugs, violent crime, weapons that we could go out and try to find and seize, and just try to clean up high crime areas that were being targeted. And my last 15 years on the department, I spent a lot of time doing the mental health aspect of it. Helped start a mental health unit in 2008, and it just kind of took off from there.
Yeah, with that, for you, covering some, as a police officer, covering some pretty dangerous situations, how did you also take care of your own mental health while doing that?
Yeah, probably not as good as I should have, to be honest with you. Like most officers, we are really focused in on helping the communities we serve and not as much focused on ourselves. I think that's just part of the job of not being a selfish person. In law enforcement, your goal is to serve others and really put yourself second. And that's what I did for many, many years. And it wasn't until, to be honest with you, until I retired in January of 2021 that it all hit me at once. It was like, wow. I dealt with a lot of situations. I saw a lot of tragedy and traumatic events, and I finally had time to start processing it. And I think that's really where it hit me. So, but along the way, I will say this: I had good coping skills in place. I just didn't know I was using them. I was going to the gym every day, working out. Had a good nucleus with a church family and support at home, no family problems at home. So the things that I needed in place to help me be resilient and well were already there. I was just blessed enough to have those in place already.
How is it helping other officers through mental health programs?
Yeah, so that's a difficult one because of the stigma, right? The stigma is still so bad in law enforcement, and I understand, I get why, right? A lot of officers don't want to ask for help because they're afraid that their leadership is not bought in to building these cultures of wellness environments that would help staff and employees really thrive. Where I'm talking about making an organization where it's okay not to be okay. It's just not okay to stay that way. So having the infrastructure in place to really help these officers with the understanding that there's really going to be no repercussion for asking for assistance, knowing that should be and seen and viewed as part of the job.
You were talking a little bit about the stigma in police office, in the police departments, but how does it feel for you to trying to, loosen that stigma?
Again, if you have buy-in from the leadership, it makes it a lot easier. The difficulty is there's always going to be change along the way, right? You're going to have leadership retire, and then new leadership come in that maybe doesn't share the same values or the same focus that your previous leadership had in place where it came to helping officers. So, and that's everything from setting up, peer support programs to having officers really feel safe and asking for some assistance. And so it's a challenge. It's a challenge no matter where you're at. I know agencies that do a very good job at cultivating a culture of wellness within their own agency. But again, because of the shift in personnel, there has to be that true buy-in that it's not the way it used to be in law enforcement, where you would just, rub some sand in it and get up, get going, get on your feet. It's things are changing. Law enforcement, a noble career in and of itself, is not a desired career field anymore like it used to be. So you really need leadership to come into place and understand that and be there and support their officers when they need it.
So what inspired you to start writing books?
So that's a funny story. So my buddy Nick Ruggiero, he had written many books, and I think every one of them hit #1 on Amazon. And he had reached out to me one day and said, "Hey, do you want to partner and write a book together?" And I'm like, I mean, I'm not a writer, Nick. I mean, I'll do your podcast or whatever. But he goes, "Well, let's do one." I'm like, "All right, I'll try." And he goes, "Well, let's do one on homicide." I'm on homicide. I mean, I've worked homicides, but I've never been assigned to a homicide unit. How about mental health? He's like, "Oh, yeah, man, I forgot. Like, you're a mental health guy. Let's do that." So it just so happened we both got COVID at the same exact time without knowing. So he is secluded, has nothing to do but to write. So I'm secluded. I'm like, well, let me go ahead and get started on this. And the idea was we were each going to write about 50 pages and then mesh it and see how it turned out. What had happened and the way the book turned out, he read my portion, I read his. We were completely on the same page, but two different points of view from the way that we wrote it. He wrote it from a supervisor's point of view, the first two chapters, and then I wrote the rest of the book more from a boots on the ground illustration on how to utilize crisis intervention training skills and de-escalation. So he was very humble in the fact that he only, I think, wrote the first 30 pages and he gave me almost 80. The book went #1 on Amazon. We got a lot of requests from police agencies. I've now got over 100 agencies that have ordered the book, and some of them use it and put it in their library and use it for training. But it was also family members, hospital staff, a variety of correction officers, dispatchers. I mean, it was all different walks of life that were finding value and benefit in learning about de-escalation and crisis intervention skills. So it had a good it casted a wide net. I still get a lot of orders today. Right now, I'm actually running a special where I'm donating 100% of the proceeds to the Leukemia Society. So we're trying to do the right thing and promote the information that's in the book, but also give back.
Yeah, how does it feel to hear stories that, from your book that people are really feeling it?
Yeah, I get contacted at least 2-3 times a week. Somebody's got a question about the book, or they've seen the HBO documentary that I'm in, Ernie and Joe Crisis Cops, and they have great feedback. Some of them like question tactics, right? Hey, why did you do this in the documentary, or why do you say this in the book? And then when you have a little bit more time to explain it and have conversation, they're like, okay, well, that makes sense. Maybe I'll try to institute that type of tactic when I'm at work. So it's always good to get feedback, whether it's positive or negative. It's really just an opportunity to have a conversation, be very open and focused about what we want to kind of delve down into when we're discussing mental health or de-escalation tactics, and help move the needle forward.
So how was it being a subject in the documentary?
Yeah, that was tough. I mean, when you watch the film, and it's still available right now on HBO Max, when you watch Ernie and Joe Crisis Cops, you look at it and you feel like, oh, wow, I kind of went on a ride along with these guys for about the last hour and a half. But in reality, Michael, it took 3 years to film this documentary. It was over 300 hours of film condensed into 96 minutes. So there was a lot that was not included in the film, thank goodness. But at the same time, it was a lot to ask for our families, because the, you know, the camera crew, the
Right.
audio crew would follow us home. They were following me to school. They were following me to church. It seemed like every time you turned around, there was a camera on you, and you have to. You're not acting. You're in a documentary, so you're just living your everyday life, and they're capturing these moments. And when Jen McShane, the director, brilliant, was filming this, I really had no idea what the end product was going to be, because there's really nothing sexy about two cops from Texas answering mental health calls. I'm like, where's the, like, who's going to really want to watch this? But what's interesting is when the film debuted at South by Southwest in 2019 and won a festival award there, um, we knew that we were in for a long year of film festivals, because the film really was about human connection
Yeah.
and not so much just going on a ride along, following officers answering mental health calls. It's, you're looking at people using empathy to make connection with other human beings that are in a crisis, and then show that empathy and use it in a way to help them with either resources, wraparound services, continuity of care, or whatever it was in the moment that that individual needed.
I like that you brought up empathy. How important is it to use empathy as a police officer?
It's a key in every situation. You know, unfortunately, in policing, and I'll say I'm guilty of it for many years. You know, you will hear an officer say, "Hey, look, I'm just doing my job." You know, to me, that's probably one of the worst things you could say. That means I'm not being empathetic to your situation. Really don't care. I'm just doing my job so I don't get in trouble. And I was so guilty of that. And until somebody said it to me one day, I was like, well, that's kind of crappy. Like, I understand you're just doing your job, but man, I've got a crisis going on over
Yeah.
here. So when the shoe was on the other foot, the aha moment went off, and I was like, look, you really have to be empathetic to people and understand that in this moment, they really could use your help, and not your "I told you so" or "there's a consequence because of this action." They really do need to feel supported. And that really is the true essence of what crisis intervention training is. It's how to connect with another individual when they're in a crisis.
So, what motivates you?
You know, right now, what motivates me is agencies that are in the process of setting up mental health units, community responder teams, co-responder teams, and they look different, right? So at the Justice Center, my job with the portfolios is to help give technical assistance to law enforcement agencies that get grants from the Department of Justice to set up these types of initiatives or specialty teams, right? So you have a co-response team, which normally you will pair an officer with a clinical social worker to respond to calls for mental health crises. So we help develop those. But then you also have community responder models, which sometimes is a medic and a social worker, and law enforcement's been removed from responding to some of these calls, right? Because for the longest time, Michael, you know, law enforcement's been the de facto to every 911 call
Yeah.
that comes in, and they're not always the best resource to send out to a situation, especially when we're talking about a mental health crisis. So what gives me passion and drives me and motivates me is seeing these programs get off the ground, the planning phase, and then really the excitement is the initiation phase once these get going, the implementation.
So, how can people reach out and learn more about you?
I don't do a whole lot of social media. I'm on LinkedIn. So if you search my name, Ernest Stevens, I'm on LinkedIn or on Twitter at estevens0845. You can reach out to me. My website for the book also has a link to send in a question or a comment, and that's erneststevens.com. Again, there you can order the book if you're interested in that. Again, I'm donating 100% of the proceeds, including the cost of the book, and shipping will cost you nothing, to Leukemia Society. So if you've got a question about the book, if you've got a question about the film, if it's free screening right now, the HBO documentary is free screening to law enforcement. You just have to go to ernieandjoethefilm.com and register at that link, and you'll be able to watch that film for free with your, if you're a first responder. And that's usually the time that my phone starts ringing, or I get emails saying, "Hey, we're going to screen the film. Can you come out and speak to the group that's in attendance?" I try to manipulate my schedule and accommodate as much as I can, having a full-time job as well, but it always seems to work out.
Yeah, how is it going there and talking to people on a personal level?
It's been fantastic. What's interesting, and I've shared this before, is anytime we screen the film, um, like when we were in Austin or Boston or wherever we were at the time, I would sit in the audience, kind of hidden. Nobody really knew who I was. I'm a nobody, right? And they would come in and watch this film for 96 minutes. They came in as strangers, and then after 96 minutes, I would go up on stage and they would have an opportunity to make comments or ask questions. And there was such a connection made during the film. They felt like they knew you. And they would start sharing their most intimate moments with you of tragedy that they've been through when it came to a mental health crisis. And we heard things like, well, if only you would have responded to our house that night, or if only that was you talking to my loved one on a bridge, or if only our community had a unit like that you belong to, things would have been different. So it was surreal in the fact that beginning of the film, and I thought, who's ever going to watch this? To now really seeing the other side of it,
Yeah.
where people really truly connected with other humans, and they're like, look, we just need to be seen and heard, respected, and helped. And that's the outcome of this film, and it's been fantastic.